Good evening. So, for the last video reflection of the semester, we watched Imposter, and today I'm going to be discussing themes, emotional response, and comparisons. So, one thing I want to talk about as it pertains to kind of themes, and to start off kind of more of the themes. One of the primary themes that I kind of realized, and I think is one that's not necessarily the most obvious, but I think is the heart of why this whole entire documentary exists, is that people out there need to be loved, especially those who, growing up were not loved and sometimes needing that attention. And some of those people will go to really crazy measures in order to do that. But I think one of the ways that this can be shown within the theme is at the beginning of the reenactment. There's a lot of blues and dark colors, especially, and then also this idea of sadness and longing, I think, is being portrayed through those tones, as well as kind of those harsh shadows, especially when we have his interview, Frederick's interview. We have really harsh shadows. We have one side where he's half of himself where is very well lit, and then literally a split in the middle, and it's all shadow. And so I thought that was really interesting when Frederick first appears after the reenactments. But I also thought it was interesting how he was wearing a blue shirt to kind of tie in that theme of almost like this sadness and longing. He also then, during that, as part of that reenactment, especially when there's the children, where they were seeing the children, he talks about being placed with kids, and he literally says himself, quote, "Nobody gave a damn about me" at 8 minutes and 38 seconds in. Additionally, shortly after that, he says I am considered one at 9:25. And so I think it's really interesting because he kind of then talks about, how he wanted to be a kid, but then right after that, it cuts to bright, sunny San Antonio, Texas, and this idea of belonging to this family that really isn't his at the end of the day. So, which kind of leads me to my next theme of people taking advantage of others' emotions and vulnerabilities and kind of playing off that, which is kind of wicked, not gonna lie. But I think especially towards the end when Frederick accuses Beverly of her son's murder, oh my goodness. I felt bad for this family. They literally took you in, loved you as if, they were, they took you in as if as if Frederick was their son, not knowing that it wasn't actually your son, and then getting blamed, or basically throwing out a false accusation that Beverly then killed. Oh my gosh. Beverly killed literally a missing family member. I was what in the world? If I were in this family's position, I would be furious, quite frankly, and also in shock. Holy cow. I wouldn't be able to wrap my head around this, and this poor family, my goodness. So I yeah, I think that was definitely a moment of like definitely taking advantage of like a vulnerable situation of like literally a missing you're like missing either brother, son, like family member, like that's pretty messed up. I'll be honest with you. But another thing, um, kind of like common theme that I found was investigation slash investigators are not perfect. Um, I think we often like assume that, and also like investigations are hard. Like you're you're piecing together a puzzle, which is not easy. Like it's like a huge jigsaw puzzle. You don't know like some things, and you don't know what people are hiding. You're trying to piece it all together. But at the end of the day, it was like investigators, especially Nancy Fisher, goodness, like empathy goes out to some of these investigators, people working for the embassy, but I think part of it may have been because of like a quick turnaround time and something that's quite rare, in the sense of reuniting Nicholas like with his family, Nicholas with his family as fast as possible because of the rarity of that probability actually like happening. Um, so, however, I think they rushed into it quite fast and missed some really key parts. Um, and so, especially when someone who's not like technically on the case, Charlie Parker, like a private investigator, discovers that this so-called Nicholas, aka Frederick, is not actually Nicholas when comparing his ears, the ears between the two of them in Photoshop. I was like, oh snap, like things are going down. So that was mind blowing to say the least. And I was also like, this idea of Nancy Fisher believing that Frederick like made this false accusation but like took him on it, like in the sense of Frederick blaming Beverly for a murder. Like that was, oh, I can't get over that. Like what in the world? But to say the least, I was also like, okay, from an actual like legalish perspective, you would, if you're possibly gonna prosecute someone for a murder, you are severely lacking in evidence in the sense of burden of proof, because you got to be considered beyond the reasonable doubt. But usually with like homicide cases, it's like usually I think it's like I'm pretty sure it's 90% of more like you have to be sure that this person committed the murder, and a polygraph test and a I guess you would have someone to testify, Frederick, but also depending on the judge, like he could probably be like, yeah, no, this person isn't actually like the best person to testify considering his track record. So I don't know. Could be. I was kind of shocked by that. But then I remember at one point as I was watching this, I was like, when everything was going down, I was honestly suspicious like of Nancy because Nancy was so trusting of Frederick. I'm like, is Nancy covering up something? Is like she the one who's like murdered this, like murdered Nicholas? Like I was not sure where this documentary was going to be going next, to be quite frankly honest. But one of the areas that I think was fine, I found interesting when comparing with, was there were certain parts within the documentary, specifically the part with like Nancy Fisher and like that kind of interview setup. It kind of gave me like a 60 Minutes Dateline kind of feel. I don't know why, but like I don't know, it kind of reminds me of like um when we covered like the John Bonet story. I don't know why that like immediately came to mind. It was like 12 years ago when I saw this. So but like it kind of reminded me of like just how that's like interviewed was kind of like set up. But also how usually what they do is like with some of these like murder cases, they talk to the actual like some of the people that are either like accused of the murder or like people. Now in this case obviously like Frederick was not accused of the murder, but like clearly tampered with this this case to a degree. um so how they also like kind of like interviewed him. But I also think part of it was like they definitely um an area that I also thought was interesting was this idea of, there's this one film that I saw, it was Thelma, where basically this 90-year-old woman was like taken advantage of by like a scam caller, and like ended up like giving away like $10,000 from her bank account and like wiring that money over um, to this. Yeah, it was. And so I think this idea of playing off of vulnerability, but also kind of getting different points of view, where it was like you have this narrative playing out, but then you also have perspectives of like different family members as well, in regards to that. And then another area, um, or another, I know it's not a film, but I don't know, I kind of drew a connection to it, was Adolescence, especially episode 1, when I kind of thought of like Jamie Miller as almost like Frederick, because especially considering how the beginning of the documentary starts, where you kind of, I don't know, you clearly know Frederick is an imposter of something and is guilty of something. We just don't know what yet. And figuring out the why he's guilty of that. So I think that idea, definitely playing that. But then also this idea of Eddie Miller and Carrie Gibson, kind of drawing that connection there, because I feel like Eddie Miller is like almost in denial that his son actually did that, committed murder. And I feel like Carrie is like clearly defending Frederick or Nicholas, that like, no, this is my son, but really at the end of the day it's like both are like kind of proven otherwise, that like, no, they're guilty. um Obviously, so that's what I thought. There's definitely something interesting there. But I also think this documentary serves as a homage to all the families that had a child reported missing, and also probably all the families Frederick imposed harm on as well, to a degree, and the people out there who have been betrayed by an imposter of some sorts, whether that's through different like phone call scams and all that. So I think it really raises an awareness for that as well, in a broader sense. So yeah.